here we are in our last lesson for the month of September. You know what that means? That means next Sunday, we are actually going to have a live Zoom opportunity. And during that opportunity, if we have time, we're going to do the lesson. But if we don't, we're just going to get together, have fun. We're going to go over some things. So I want to make sure that you guys are getting your mailings. Your mailings should consist of a newsletter. So this is actually this week's newsletter, and it has the story picture right there. I do, of course, put it in these lessons, but it's always fun to see them there, and there's a little bit of something there. Well, there's some fun stuff in there, and this is one of them. Doom, 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 doom. So, this one is we need some coins, and this one shows quarters on it. It has a Lincoln. George Washington. It has George Washington. So that's a quarter. Now, I don't carry a lot of change with me, but that's okay because my husband has a coin bank I'm going to borrow from. Okay, here's my little setup. It says I need to have 5 coins. 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it wants me to have 3 coins like this. 2, 3. And then another coin there. So that's 5 plus 3 plus 1. I know this isn't school, but here we go. 5 plus 3 plus 1. So that's 9, right? It's 9 coins. So in this case, we're using quarters like the picture shown. And it says, make a square by moving only 2 coins. Well, this is a triangle. So how am I going to make that into a square? Puzzle. Did you guys figure it out? If you look closer, that bottom picture shows you what the trick is if you got your mailing this week. So if you figured it out, awesome. I couldn't. I had to look at the answer. But you know, sometimes problems are fun to solve. And our Bible story today tells us about a real and important problem and how God solved it in an amazing way. It all started with a man whose name is in Exodus 5:1. You guys are so good at puzzles. Did you figure out who we are going to learn about again today? Well, do you? I bet you guys figured it out. Moses. That's right. We talked about him the last week, so here we go again. We actually talked about him for 2 weeks, so here we go, 3 weeks into it. You guys remember that the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and they had to work really, really hard. And then Moses went away he was 40, then he went away for 40 years, so he's like 80. And he comes back, right? But he says, Lord, I can't because, I stutter, I stammer. That's not fun, is it? No, we get all tongue-tied sometimes. Well, that was something he lived with every day, not just when he was talking to lots of people, but every day. I can't imagine living with something like that. I struggle enough as it is without stuttering or stammering, so, well, maybe I do stammer. I don't know. I do get lost in my train of thought, that's for sure. Are you guys still there? Well, come on back. Here we go. Well, you guys, we know that Moses and Aaron, they went to see Pharaoh. And they said, this is what they said. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go. Do you think Pharaoh cared? Not at all. He's like, who's the Lord that I should obey him? I don't know him. He's not my God. He's not who I worship. But Pharaoh decided the slaves weren't going to be let go. And he's like, you guys, you're going to work harder. Because Moses over here, he's like, let my people go. So he made them work harder. And soon the Israelites were mad, and they said, you've made a mess of things, and now Pharaoh and his men want to kill us with even more work. Well, what do you think Moses did? He prayed. I know when I'm struggling with things, I pray. That seems to be like the first thing I think about when I'm having some troubles. Well, God told Moses that all he needed to do was to obey. And when Moses returned to Pharaoh, he did miracles to show that God was indeed the one and true God. But Pharaoh's heart was hard. It means he wasn't going to listen. He would not let those Israelites go. So God began to send plagues on Egypt. Well, do you remember what those plagues were? They're pretty gross. First, he turned the water into blood. I mean, can you imagine swimming in blood? That just seems disgusting. Like, blood, I think, can be thick and sticky, and oh, it's just gross, and it can get stinky too. Have you ever had a Band-Aid that had dried blood on it and how stinky that gets? Yeah, because there's like this bacteria that grows in there. It's gross. Well, but that still did not change Pharaoh's mind. So God sent frogs, which frogs are pretty cute and pretty fun. But when it's one frog or even a couple frogs, it's not a big deal. But it was a lot of frogs. And people would get into bed at night and frogs would be there. And they'd go into the kitchen or they'd sit down and there's frogs in the food and frogs in the ovens. And there were frogs everywhere. And you know what? This just annoyed Pharaoh. It annoyed him enough that he told Moses, if you make those frogs go away, I'll let the people go. So, except for the frogs in the Nile, which, that's where they were naturally living, all of the frogs died. And they stank because, they just fell dead in their place. And so God caused all of this stinky, stinky stuff. But you know what? Pharaoh still did not change his mind. So God sent gnats, those teeny tiny little flies, those little annoying flies that they come all over your fruit sometimes if your fruit is overripe. Well, a one or two is not a big deal, but if you've ever walked into a swarm of those things, they like get in your nose and in your eyes and in your mouth, and they're in your hair. They're gross. And then God sent big flies, lots of big flies, but the flies were only in the homes and the palaces of the Egyptians, not the Israelites. Pharaoh said he'd let the people go if God would remove the flies. So Moses prayed, and God did what Moses asked, but Pharaoh changed his mind again. Moses warned Pharaoh that things were going to get worse, but Pharaoh didn't care. He thought Moses was full of baloney. Next, all of the Egyptians' livestock got sick, but not even one of the Israelites' animals was ill. And then both the Egyptian people and their animals got horrible sores on them. We're not talking about just like a little sore here and a little sore there. We're talking about sores that were so itchy and scratchy that it would cause open wounds, and then those would be gross and oh. And if that wasn't enough, God sent hail, those raindrops, but they're like little ice cubes, but and if you've ever been in a heavy hailstorm, those things can hurt. What? They could be little and they hurt, but these were big. And you know what? They weren't just painful. So like if I went and hit under, my house, that's not a big deal, but it will destroy crops. And it destroyed, guess whose crops? The Egyptians, Pharaoh's crops. But did it destroy the Israelites' crops? Nope, not at all. Not at all. And then these bugs called locusts, they're kind of like grasshoppers, came in. And those will eat up everything. And darkness followed for the Egyptians, but the Israelites' homes and their fields, they were all protected. And Pharaoh, he still would not change his mind. I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine being a ruler and making terrible mistake after terrible mistake. I would never want to be in that position because, sometimes I don't listen to God very well. Well, but I don't want to be like Pharaoh. I do know that. I better be praying about that I'm never like Pharaoh. Finally, God told Moses that he was sending a plague that would convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. And God's people needed to be ready. Now, when this plague hit, it would be time to move right away. The Israelites just did that. They did just that. They did just what God told them. Each family took a perfect male lamb and marked their doorposts with blood. They roasted and ate the lamb meat, and wearing their coats, they were ready to go. This meal was called the Passover because the lamb's blood on the door kept everyone in that house safe. But in any house where a door was not marked, all the firstborn died. People, birds, animals, all the firstborn died, even in Pharaoh's palace. And in the middle of the night, stubborn Pharaoh finally summoned Aaron and Moses. He said, "Up," he shouted, "leave my people go." So the Israelites left, moving out into the darkness of the desert. Do you think they were scared? They were following God to the land he had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God was keeping his promise and leading his people to the promised land. Well, God rescued his people in an amazing way, didn't he? He helped all the people know that he was really the one true God. God's rescue of the Israelites from the last plague is something that Jewish people have celebrated every year since that time. They call that celebration the Passover. And that was the very same holiday that Jewish people were celebrating when Jesus was killed on a cross many, many years after the story took place. You guys, I'm going to read John 1:29. This is our Bible verse today. Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Jesus was called the Lamb of God because he is God's perfect Son, and his death on the cross made the way for God to forgive the sin of all the people who believe in him. The Passover is more than something that happened to the Israelites many, many years ago. It is also a picture of how God made a way for us to be saved by Jesus, the Lamb of God. Without God's forgiveness, we can't escape from the penalty of our sin. It's as if we are in slavery, just like the Israelites were. But when Jesus died on the cross, he paid the price for all the wrong things that we have done. He's paid the price for all the wrong things that we will do. And he will pay the price for all of the sins that will come later. When we trust in Jesus, we are truly free and part of God's family forever.